Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope. All right, Mr. Brett, we are here for episode 13, which is going to be part 2 of Bobby T coming off of episode 12, a 2-part podcast.
Man.
Yes, it's an epic story.
So much more to come.
It is. And so what is on your mind today?
Well, what's on my mind, especially after doing a few of these, you said we're up to how many?
This is 13.
13 of them.
Yep.
And I've kind of heard this reoccurring theme. And I think it is basically this. If you don't get this program, stick around until it gets you.
Right, and that would be important, and it's part of the keep coming back mantra that I keep speaking about. And that's that a lot of people will come into a meeting and they'll, and actually Bobby T talked a little bit about this, his first meeting, when he heard some truth, but he didn't want to return. He wasn't ready yet.
Well, not only that, it's scary because we're facing reality.
Right, and
we're living in our own reality.
We're also facing a very unfamiliar vibe, and that is that people genuinely want to help us for no reason other than they want to help us.
And that's weird.
If it's weird, we're not used to it, so it scares some people away. But the message in what you just said is even if you don't fully, grasp everything, that's okay.
Right.
The important thing is you keep coming back until the program gets you.
And that seed, like he also said, that seed gets planted, right? And so as we're moving through our debauchery and craziness and unmanageability, that little seed, not steed, horse, is kind of growing inside us.
Yeah. And
One day at a time, it's growing. And if we're still doing this and then we go back, and then that seed grows a little more, and then eventually, hopefully,
if you stick around. The problem is people will come into a meeting, maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows, right?
Yeah.
And then they just won't be there anymore. And if you were to ask them, they would say, well, yeah, AA, it's good, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And it's not that it didn't work for them. It's that they didn't stick around long enough for the program to get them.
Yeah.
And people in AA always say, we'll love you until you learn to love yourself, And that's true. And, even if you just give just the fellowship part of it a little bit of time, you're going to start to see some change.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, you're going to be introduced to a sponsor and the steps. And
that's the exact advice I get, because we hear as soon as we get there, you need a sponsor. Like almost immediately somebody will say that. And I'm like, let's get AA a little bit.
Let me see what this is about
first. Let's soak this in, see what it's kind of about, and then we can do that.
Right, but like we said before, don't leave before the miracle happens.
Yeah. Yep. If you don't get AA, keep getting here until AA gets you.
That's right, and that's a great little mantra. So, anyway, big moment for us. We're getting into a back-to-back AB episode of 12 and 13 with Bobby T. His saga is going to continue.
And I'm going to put a personal guarantee. This gets good.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Yep.
So without further ado, let's welcome our guest for part 2, Bobby T.
Bobby.
Welcome back for Bobby T. part 2.
Oh, it is going to be good.
And so, Bob, so glad you could do the part 2 with us. We want to hear more about the story where we left off. If you haven't heard episode number 12, please go back and listen to that. It kind of lays the foundation of the Crazy Life Bob.
Yeah,
but now we're going to find out what happened. And so if you want to pick it back up, Bob, go ahead.
All right. So I think we were mentioning I had almost wiped out on the highway, and I had this idea in my head that I got to stop living this way. So I had convinced myself that I had stopped drinking before, so I'm going to do this on my own. And I was making it for a week or two,
Week
without
or two.
week or two.
Better than I ever did.
Without a drink, and then all of a sudden I would have one, and then off to the races for a couple of days, and then I say, wait a minute, I was going to stop. I'm going to stop. And what happened was I did go to one AA meeting during that period, and what I did was I sat across the street in the parking lot, and I never went inside. I felt so lost and like such a friggin' loser. I just didn't do it. And I went home and I acted like I had gone to the meeting. And what's funny is, I mentioned that she was a lot younger than me, the girl I was with at the time. She's pregnant with my kid, and she said, "You didn't even go to the meeting, did you?"
So she knew.
Figured that
And I'm
shit
like,
out.
She
what
could
do you
tell.
mean? What do you say? I'm lying?
Of course.
Yeah. So what happened was on a Wednesday, I left the house on the bike to go get a loaf of bread, and Friday morning I was on my way home, and and I legitimately went to go get a loaf of bread. You know, I went down to the store and I ran into a friend of mine, and he said, "Let's pop in over there and have a drink." And all right, I'll just have one. And then I was gone for a couple days, and I'll tell you about my last night drinking. My last night drinking was phenomenal for a drunk. I met a group of girls, ended up going back to one of the girls' house, spending the night there, and all of that entails.
Bingo.
And then this woman had just broken up with her boyfriend, and he had just moved out. And so she's like, well, in case he comes by, go sleep on the couch. So I went out and I slept on the couch. And I got out there about 4 o'clock in the morning. And about 7 o'clock in the morning, boom, 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 boom on the door. And the door opens up. I crack one eyeball open and look over there. And this dude is freaking huge. And I go, oh, shit, right? And but he goes in the bedroom and argues with her for a little while, and then he leaves. So I go back to sleep. And then about a half an hour later, he's back. And he's pounding on the door, and again, I crack the eyeball, and he goes in and he argues, and he leaves again. And then she comes over and says, look, you're going to have to go. Your bike's sitting out front. He's driving by. He can see that. You're going to have to go. So I said, all right. So at this point, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm on the bike, and I'm riding home, and I'm a long way from home, about 25 miles from my house. And it's daylight, and I'm still drunk from the night before. Mm-hmm. And one thing I always like to do, everything under the cover of darkness. It's kind of like a vampire. And daylight was not my thing. I did not drink during the day.
Did you find it like your skin burned if you were out in the
pretty
sun?
Much, yeah. People could see me.
Yeah.
So I might start drinking at noon, but I'm gonna be pretty drunk by dark. So, anyways. I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, Jesus, I just can't do this anymore. And I'm not a suicidal guy. I've never been. I'm more apt to hurt you than me. But I was thinking about running my bike into a truck or something. And I mean, that thought was on my mind.
Inside you are in a very dark place. Your soul is hurting.
Absolutely.
You're saying to yourself, I can't live like this.
Absolutely.
And so, the best option is to flat it in right into a truck.
So what happens?
So I make the decision I'm going to a meeting tonight. And I go home. Now, mind you, I've been gone 2 days. This girl is not a calm person. But I come in and I tell her I'm done. I'm not doing this shit anymore. Just let me go to sleep. When I get up, I'm going to a meeting. And she said, okay. And I did. And I went to sleep, and I got up at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was a meeting a Friday night meeting that you guys have both been to, and hopefully I can say that. And I went to that meeting, and I sat in the corner, and I friggin' cried. And I thought, what a friggin' loser I am. I can't believe it's come to this. I'm sitting in an AA meeting on a Friday night, and I cried the whole time. And I've always fancied myself this tough dude. You knock me down, I get back up. I don't give a shit. I have this survivor mentality. No matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. No matter what happens, I know I can make it through. Maybe I'm not going to be okay, but I'm going to make it through, And but I find myself, I went to the meeting, and, we had talked earlier about surrender, So that was, I knew I was going to have to deal with God if I went there. I knew this was, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to have to talk about this. And so there was a guy there at that meeting that I'd known for a long time that had no idea he was sober. He was kind of part of my extended family. And he, partway through the meeting, I hadn't seen him in quite some time, partway through the meeting, he realized who I was. And he said, you got to put the plug in the jug, you got to stop doing all the stuff, and you got to deal with God. Just
Easy.
Easy, yeah. But I mean, it's what I needed to hear, and I knew when I walked in the door, I'm going to have to deal with this God thing. So what I did, though, is, they passed around a paper with numbers on it, and about 5 guys said, nobody ever calls a number. So I'm like, okay, I'm calling somebody.
You're like, fuck you, I'm calling.
Exactly. That was exactly.
I'll show you.
Yep. I'm going to call one of these assholes. And I called somebody the next day, and I went to a meeting every day. They said 90 and 90 days. I had heard that before. When I was in the halfway house and all that. And I did. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days.
Well, so you actually did it.
I actually did it.
Nice. 2 for 2 on the things that people never do.
And, well, a lot of people say I did 180. I didn't do that shit. I did 90. One a day.
I'm not going to do any more, but I'll do that.
Yeah, I'll do what's required because, again, I can follow the rules, and which kind of leads into that book because, the book is a set of rules that's designed for living that works, and I can follow rules. I did well in jail because I just followed the rules, I did well in school because I followed the rules. The reason I had a problem with school is I was drinking and I didn't go there anymore.
Right. So this first 90 days, you're making connections.
I did. I met some people right away that I'm still friends with today, and that dragged me in. Part of that story, too, is that, I was, like I said before, I'm a biker, man. I've been riding my whole life. And I was riding around in circles after meetings, though, for the first, 30 days. And I was thinking to myself, if I got to stop riding, I'm not going to stop drinking. It's just not going to happen because this is such a huge part of my life. And I love this thing, and it's always been a part. Since I'm 10 years old. I built a mini bike at 10. I've had a motorcycle ever since. And so I'm riding around in circles, but I kept going to a few different meetings. People were saying, hey, over at this Tuesday night meeting, there's some guys that ride. You should go to that meeting. And I listened to that for 3 weeks before I went, maybe I should go to that meeting.
I've heard that for 3 weeks in a row now. Maybe I should go to that one.
So I did. I go there on this Tuesday night, and there's a couple guys there on bikes, and right away they grabbed a hold of me because I showed up on a motorcycle, and they talked to me after the meeting. And we rode up Route 11 together. We rode up a road together, the three of us, and I knew I was home, man. I knew it. I could feel it. I'm like, this is what I'm missing here. This is what I'm missing. And I asked one of those guys to be my sponsor the following week. So it was a month in. I knew I was. You've probably heard this before. I had the gift of desperation. I was so sick and tired of being who I was. So sick and tired of not being who I want to be. Drinking on a shame of yesterday and a fear of tomorrow and just this vicious friggin' circle, and I'm dying inside. And so when I came, that's where I was at, man. I'm all right, God. Okay, fine. Fuck it. Let's talk about God. And that's where I was at. So and then I heard a guy, and you guys know this dude. I heard a guy talk right in the first month or so, talk about this experience, this out-of-body experience that he had. And I followed the dude in the bathroom and said, hey, man, tell me more about this story. Because I want to hear this. But you guys know him. He don't give a shit. He told me the story. And we started going out after that Friday night meeting. We started going out for food afterwards. And a whole bunch of people. And back then, there'd be 30 people that would go on a Friday night. And that's where I really started to learn about this living sober thing. It wasn't just about not drinking. It's about living. I thought my life was over with. I thought I'm never going to do anything fun again.
Right, and and so you got this at the meeting after the meeting. And for those people who haven't been around that long, we talk about the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting. That means getting there early and just having fellowship with other people.
Yep.
Then the meeting. Then after the meeting, if people are going out, go. That's where you make these personal connections with people.
That was told to me very early on, and I made that my habit, and I still do this day. Hour before, hour after, without fail.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And so that Friday night thing going out for dinner, it's 15 years later, I'm still doing that every Friday night.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep, still doing it. And I look forward to it,
So you're doing this 90 and 90, and all these different elements that have been swirling about before are all coming together. So these things that you've been hearing about and maybe getting a taste of, you're starting to go in you jump in with both feet, and they're starting to really become part of your program.
Absolutely. And a couple things that happened in that first month or so. There were 2 older ladies that both have passed on now. But there were 2 older ladies that I saw a bunch of times, and the one in particular, this woman, Sue, I'd been to about 2 meetings where she was at, and I showed up at a meeting later in the week, and this was in the first week.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came in, she came over and she gave me this hug, and she said, "I'm so happy to see you." And I remember thinking, why?
Right.
That's what comes to my mind. Why? So I said it. I go, why? And she said, I want to see you do well. I'm happy. I'm glad you're coming. I'm glad you're here. You need this, honey. And I went, wow. And then there was this other older lady, Mickey, that a lot of people talk about. And Mickey was grabbing me and giving me a kiss on the cheek and saying, "I'm so happy to see you." And I remember thinking, nobody said that to me in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
My boys that I was partying with, they might be happy to see me if I had some dope in my pocket.
Yeah.
And they know I'm buying the drinks tonight,
Yeah.
But I knew why they were happy to see me.
And the funny thing is that seems kind of foreign to us, but yet we know it's genuine, and that's part of the attraction, I think, of sobriety for us.
And interestingly enough, if guys had said that to me, that would have turned me off.
Yeah.
I would have been, what are these dudes, you know what I mean? But this was 2 older ladies that have no designs other than
So I should stop hugging and kissing.
Well, the kissing part's got to stop.
I don't mind the hugs, but
right.
yeah, the tongue
We'll
and
save
finger-
that for another episode. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Brett, I get it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's not about me.
Yeah,
I
especially,
got to say that you're a good kisser.
I don't like it when he puts his tongue in my ear. But
Shit gets weird.
I'm
So
speechless.
anyway, so you're doing this 90 and 90. You're making these connections. You're starting to turn it around. You get a sponsor?
I did. I got the sponsor. Well, like I say, within a month, I had a sponsor.
Right.
And we started working on the steps. And so it did take about a year for me to go through all of the steps. But I'll tell you something stuff that happened during that time. All right. So I talked about my father living on the street, and he had done that. He had been on the street for almost 30 years. When he turned 62, I helped him get an apartment. All right. Now I was still drinking and using then, but I helped him get off the street. I helped him get his Social Security set up, and I became his representative payee. And I did not do that for him. I did it for me. For 2
Yeah, 'cause
reasons.
he used to beat you and not
And
have the greatest life.
I did it for 2 reasons. I did it because I wanted to feel better
Yeah.
about the situation, and I'm going to spend some of his money. Okay, and that's what I did. So I made sure his bills were paid. I made sure he had food, and whatever's left over, I would.
Is he in bad physical shape at this time?
He was a survivor too, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. So I get him off the street, and I get him his first apartment, and I stop over there, every once or so a week, and so I'm over there a couple times this one week, and he's eating pizza, and I stop back, and he's got pizza again, and I know he doesn't have any money. Because any money he does have is going to booze. And I go, where the hell are you getting all this pizza? And he walks over to the window and he points to this dumpster behind a Little Caesars. He says, "You see that dumpster right there? They throw pizza out every night." And I'm in two things happen. A, I'm disgusted. And B, I'm in awe.
Right.
Because this dude will survive no matter what. And he's sitting on his couch watching golf, eating pizza out of the dumpster from next door. So it was hard to break him of his old habits. So, so during that time, though, I had helped him get off the street, and I was stopping over there, and I would bring booze with me, and I would talk to him about stuff. And as long as you brought booze, he would tell you anything.
Right.
He'd
that
tell
was
you
your key-
anything.
That was your key card to get into the club.
He didn't care. And I remember dumping a bag of Coke on his kitchen table and cutting up lines and saying, "Hey, you want a line?" And him getting more, "I'm not a goddamn drug addict." I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't take a bath." I mean, he's looking down on me, right? And
I'm not following your logic, Dad.
yeah. So I get sober, and I get to the point where I'm working on a 4-step, and my main focus is I want me to be forgiven. You know what I mean? I'm working towards amends, brother. I want people to forgive me for all the shit that I've done. I am not thinking about forgiving anybody else. And all my problems are my father's fault. I wouldn't be an alcoholic if he wasn't my father. Even if it's hereditary or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's all his fault. And I'm working on this 4-step, and it's Thanksgiving. I go to my mom's house, and I have dinner at my mom's. And when I left, I made a plate and I brought it over to my father's house. Now, when I got there, he wasn't drunk. He might have had a couple, but he was not drunk, okay? And I sat down with a plate of food, and I smoked a cigar with him. And when I got up to leave, he stood up, and he said, "Bobby, I love you." And he grabbed me. And he goes almost, I hold back the tears right now. So he grabbed me and he said he loved me. And all of this anger and all of this angst was gone. God took that right in that moment. This God that I have said since I've been sober that I don't understand. We talk about God as we understand him. For me, as God as I don't understand him. I just know he works in my life. I know this. Whatever God is, it works in my life. And I don't care what you think it is. I think it's the same thing I do. But anyways, this happened in a moment. And if you'd asked me when I was walking in the door if I gave a shit whether he loved me or not, I would have said no, and I would have meant it. I would have meant it, I didn't know I needed that, and I forgave everything in that moment. And I didn't do it. It happened.
Right. And, people say that your higher power does for you what you can't do for yourself. But a lot of times that means that your higher power is doing something for you that you don't even know you need for yourself.
Without a doubt.
And then it hits, and it's like you're in awe. Right?
I'll take one step back. I told you about stalking my first wife.
Yeah.
All right. So that whole month that I tried to find her, and I kept finding her by herself, the dude she was with was in rehab.
Oh, shit.
And I think that's God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, because that would have went really
you a
bad.
lifetime in jail.
Again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So wow, that's kooky. So you're doing this 90 and 90. You have a sponsor. You're working the steps. You're having these God moments.
Yes. And so this relationship with my father was mended in a moment. And I started to look at him as a human being with a problem with this alcoholism that I have, and I started to do things for him. And
Sounds like a little humility.
It was awesome, man. It was. And I started to take him fishing once in a while and get him out of the house. And I still brought him beer because he's got to have it. He's not going to stop drinking. But I'll say this. He was proud of me. He'd ask me, "You still going to them meetings?" I am. Good for you.
It was an attraction.
Yep, good for you, he'd say. And I go, "You want to go?" "Fuck no, I don't want to go. But as long as you're going."
Yeah.
So another step farther than that is this son I was talking about, my first son, who is drinking and drugging like I did. He's a chip off the old block without a doubt. He's selling weed out of his house. A kid tried to kill him, ran him over with his car, and he got a settlement out of that. And I talked him into buying a house. He was 20 years old. I said, "Buy a house with that money. Don't piss it all away." And he, "What am I going to do with a house?" I'm like, "Lee, nobody can throw you out. Okay? If you own a house, nobody can make you leave." And he was like, "That's a good idea." So he buys a house, but he's living the way I was, right? And a guy the guy who's my sponsor now, I was talking to him about it, and he said, "My grown children, I don't tell them what to do. If they don't live in my house, I don't tell them what to do." He said, "If they ask me for my advice, I give it to them, but otherwise I let them live their own life." He said, "He doesn't belong to you. He belongs to God." So I started to pray on that, and I started to pray on letting Lee do his own thing and live the way he wanted to live. And so I'll tell you what I think is kind of a funny story. He calls me one night, and he's drunk. And he's yelling in the phone, "Bring the shotgun. These dudes down the street got to go. Bring the shotgun." And I'm going, "Lee, go home and go to bed, man. Go home and go to bed. I'm not doing that, And I hung the phone up on him. And one of the hardest things I ever did in my life was shut that phone off that night and leave him to his own devices. And I did that. And in the morning when I woke up, I turned the phone on, and I had about 6 messages from him. And one of them was, "Ever since you got sober, you've gone soft." I'm thinking, "You asshole."
Ever since you got sober, you've gone sane.
So I drive to his house, and I play the message for him because he doesn't remember leaving him. He doesn't remember calling me at all. And he's like, "Oh, man, I feel bad." Well, you should. So anyways, I started to let him live his own life. And we had been at odds for 3 or 4 years because I'm trying to tell him what to do. Do as I say, not as I do. It never worked with me. Why would it work with him? But now I've left him alone, and he actually went to meetings for a little while.
No kidding.
He tried to get sober, and he'd go back to drinking. And he tried to get sober, and he'd go back to drinking. And for about 6-8 months, he was doing that. He was bouncing in and out. And I thought that he would come through the other side, like I did. That's what I thought was going to happen, and that eventually AA would grab him, like we talked about. And but what actually happened was he OD'd. He OD'd and died.
Opiates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that where the program has been such a blessing in my life, that even with this terrible thing, I had almost 2 years where our relationship was awesome because I was letting him live his own life. I'd given him back to God, as simple as that. And what happened. Those last 2 years were awesome years with him. I wouldn't go to his house after dark. I would go down there during the day. He'd always give me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. Love you, Dad. Right in front of his homies.
Yeah, but
And-
like you say that, the last years of your dad's life and those 2 years of your son's life were gifts you got from the program you would have never
Absolutely.
had.
I would not have had them. And I have, again, this Thanksgiving comes into play because Thanksgiving night, 3 days before my son died, he was at my mother's house. I had both my boys there. And we had a great day, and I hadn't seen Lee for about a month before that. And I have these pictures from that night. It's still, I just love to see him because it was a wonderful day. And 3 days later, he was gone. And I'll tell you this: we talk about in this program stepping over bodies, and I stepped over my son's body that night.
Yeah.
Because I went to his house, and first of all, the cop said you can't go up and see him, and I said, "Fuck that! That's my son, and I'm going up there." And they let me go up there. And I went up and I kneeled with him and I said a prayer. And then I got up and I stepped over him. I went in the bathroom. And literally stepped over his body.
Yeah. I mean, this disease took my father.
Yeah.
And he was young, man. He was a young man. And, but the thing about my father is it not only took his life when he was 56, it took him away from me when I was about 9 when he got into heavy drinking because at 9 he became a very remote father. He never hit us. He was never even an asshole. He was actually a pretty nice, funny guy. But he was not a part of my life from that point on. And then he ended up cheating on my mother. He robbed my mother of having a good husband.
Yeah.
I mean, it just robs people.
It robs 100%.
And the program and sobriety gives people. It gives you gifts.
Yep.
And so, that's the thing about addiction and sobriety, and then, the two sides of that coin, one just being the most horrible thing in the world and the other thing being this gift. And it's like a knife's edge, man. I mean, any of us can go out and drink today, and we can turn our lives into shit and our families' lives into a living hell. We can do it, and that's the nature of the disease. But like you say, I've had super close friends die, and there's nothing I can do about it, man.
So let's talk about the gifts of that.
Yeah.
Because here's what happened, okay? I got a phone call. I was on my way back from another city. I was about an hour out of town, and I got a phone call, and it was somebody screaming, and I didn't understand, and I hung up. And I called it back, and what it was my son's mother saying that Lee was gone. And I was way out on this route. There's a rest stop out on this way back road that I've been by I don't know how many times, and I used to think, why is this rest stop here? And there's nothing here, but that's where I was. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think God put the rest stop there for me, but that's where I was. So I pulled over, and it was pouring rain, and I got out of the van and literally went to my knees because I couldn't stand, and I reached out with everything I got in me. God, what do I do now? And I felt this presence come over me, and this presence, this weight, and this feeling of it's going to be okay. God did not speak to me, but was there with me without a doubt. And this powerful, powerful thing happened. I mean, I got hair standing up on my arms talking about it right now. And what happened was I got back up, I got in the van, and I called my sponsor.
Right, you did the next right thing.
I did the next right thing.
Yeah, there it is.
The next right thing. And that, it's good that you say that because that's something that I say all the time that was drilled into my head in the beginning. Next right thing for the next right reason, and things fall into place. And that has happened for me. So I drive to my son's house. I told you a story about stepping over his body and all that. What I didn't add is I had called my sponsor. I told him what was going on. By the time I got to my son's house, 4 of my friends were there.
Yeah,
waiting for me. Yep. Okay, and these guys carried me, and the next week was freaking hell. Making funeral arrangements and everything else. But what I did was I prayed constantly, and I was dreading this funeral, absolutely dreading it. But what happened at the funeral was so many people came and showed love, so many people from AA, and then above and beyond that was my son had a lot of friends, and all of these kids came, and for the next few days after the funeral, another little part of that is these kids all friended me on Facebook. And I was up to 2, 3 in the morning every night talking to these kids. And some of them are still friends of mine, and it's been 13 years.
Yeah.
Some of them are still like one girl just the other day said, I'm so happy you're in my life. And so these are the gifts that came from this horrible thing.
And they are the gifts of sobriety.
Absolutely. And I learned, too, that, my whole life I thought everything happened to me. This happened to me because of what I did or what I didn't do, and it happened to me, and that's not what happened. It was a terrible event in my life, but it didn't happen to me. And there are no rules in this thing. There are no rules.
You know what I've heard
to
is,
life.
things like this don't happen to us. They just happen.
Yeah.
And then we put this ownership on them, and we make it all about us.
All about us. Yep.
And if we can let that go, a lot of times things happen like that. And then after that, if we do the right things happen for us.
Absolutely.
Things are put in our path that are good and allow us to help other people even. And even you just telling the story on this podcast, I can guarantee you somewhere somebody is going to hear this podcast and they're going to absolutely relate to your loss and to what happened to you and the reactions you got from people. I guarantee that. It's so common,
So one more thing about this story.
Sure, go ahead.
So we have the funeral. Again, it was actually this beautiful experience. And then afterwards, a whole bunch of us went back to my mother's house, and we ate and whatnot. It was wintertime, and it was snowing, and my son always loved the snow. Like I said earlier, he'd lived in California for a period of time, and when he would come in the wintertime, we'd get a blizzard every time he
would
came.
love it, huh?
He loved it. So nobody wants me to go home alone that night. Okay? Nobody wants me to go home alone. But I'm like, look, I'm okay, and I want to. I want to go home by myself. I'm all right. Now, music is a huge part of my life, always has been. It's really got me through a lot of stuff. I had not listened to music for at least since he passed away. I hadn't turned the radio on. I hadn't put anything on in my house. I couldn't do it. And there's a song by Temple of the Dog, Hunger Strike.
Mm-hmm, yep.
You're familiar with it, okay? Him and I both love that song very much. I got in the car. I turned the radio on. Hunger Strike was just starting. I only live a couple miles from my mom's house. When I pulled in the driveway, it was snowing. There was tons of snow coming down. Hunger Strike was playing. I pulled in the driveway at my house. Again, I got goosebumps right now talking about it. I pulled in the driveway at my house. The song ended. I shut the car off. And I went, man, if that ain't Lee, right here with me, I don't know what is. And what I've learned from this is that I firmly 100% believe there's something on the other side. I know there is. I've felt his presence many times since then, and it's something that I've learned here about mindfulness and being in the moment. When I can shut out the chaos and the calamity of the world and I can just be where I am, I can feel things.
Yeah.
I can feel things.
Yep.
And I never could do that before, but...
Alcohol and drugs take away so much from us, and one of the biggest things is I don't think that we realize is exactly what you're talking about. Is we have this, and they say in the program that we'll intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. That intuition is our connection with what you're talking about.
Dig it.
That is completely gone when you're drinking and drugging. Yep. Completely gone, and it takes a while to get that back.
In having a spiritual awakening, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm connected to the world if I allow myself to be. And it's just that simple. If I allow myself to be, I'm connected to the world. And I'm connected to this God that I don't understand.
It's always available 100% of the time.
100%.
It's up to us to make the connection, to reach,
Yep.
It's always reaching for us. All we got to do is reach a little bit, And so, you're having these spiritual experiences, and you go through this big tragedy. Now, how far along are you in sobriety?
I was about 2 years sober.
Yeah.
But I had gotten
a lot.
I had gotten this thing, you know what I mean? I'd done the work. I had this connection.
Yeah.
And not only did I had enough of a connection with a God that I didn't understand to ask him for help, and he provided it immediately. And that's something that I've learned along the way. Anytime I'm struggling with anything, when I finally get done bitching about it and start actually praying about it, the answers come.
Let me ask you this. We've talked about this with a few of the other guests, but what I thought when I first came in was a throwaway line, which was if you do the right things for the right reasons and you come to meetings and you don't pick up that first drink, your life will get better beyond your wildest dreams, which I thought was complete bullshit when I came in, because I'm like, these people don't know what my wildest dreams are. And at the time, they were all things that were wealth and flash
material.
and ego
Hot
and
women,
material
fast
and
cars.
bullshit. and so what we really find out is our wildest dreams are things like you just talked about, is these situations where we really touch or are touched by the reality of the spirit.
Yeah.
And, and it can't be denied. Once you experience it, it cannot be denied.
Definitely not.
You can't give it to anyone, and you can't even really fully explain it to someone. But once you experience it, holy shit, it cannot be denied.
So you talk about doing the next right thing for the next right reason, and this is something that has worked, huge things in my life. I don't have anything I feel guilty about today.
Yeah.
Because I tried to do the right thing for the right reason. So all the things I did in the past that I carried guilt for were swept away by doing the steps. I made the amends that I could make. Some people didn't really want them, but most people did. And there's one funny story about that. I went back to an ex-girlfriend and I made amends to her, and she ended up saying, "Well, that ain't even half the shit you did," and we got in an argument.
It doesn't.
I got another resentment to work
Then I
on.
go talk to my sponsor. Now you got to make amends or making amends, and blah blah blah.
How far
But
you go?
but the next right thing for the next right reason. So I've had this spiritual awakening as a result of these 12 steps, and now I'm trying to do the right thing for the right reason, which I have never done in my life. I've always known the right thing and consistently said, "Fuck that, I'm doing what I want to do."
I'm going to do what feels good.
Yeah, and so it turns out that what really feels good is doing the right thing for the right reason, even when it's difficult, even when it's hard, and so I've been able to build self-esteem for myself, which is something I didn't know I didn't have. I thought I was this tough-ass dude, didn't give a shit about nothing, not afraid of anything. We're going to do a 4-step, and you're going to write down your fears. Well, I ain't afraid of shit, man. I've wrecked cars. I've been in fights. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. I've been to jail. What am I afraid of? Nothing, right? Turns out I'm afraid you don't like me.
And
Turns out I'm afraid of everything.
You're not going to like me, and I'm not good enough, and I don't measure up. And these are things that,
Yeah, and something that really just a minute ago that hit me is when you said after you did your 4th and 5th, you were able to sweep it away. And I think a lot of people, in my experience, gloss over step 6 and 7, and that's exactly what we have to do to be able to even reach what you're talking about now that you have. That was really cool because I haven't really heard that much yet, being able to just say, this doesn't work anymore. Here it is. Take all these things that I struggled with and all this stuff that I had guilt for, and you were just able to move on and find this new spiritual way.
and let somebody else tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And it's not even telling me what to do, but just how about trying this instead? All right, we'll try that.
And what always I thought was interesting is just the little part of the line, "beyond my wildest dreams." The word "beyond" is perfect.
Yeah.
Because there's my wildest dreams, which were garbage, and then there's everything beyond that, and that's where you end up because you don't know it.
Yeah, we don't
It's
even
beyond
know it.
your knowledge.
Yeah.
But until you feel like let's take helping other people, helping other alcoholics. The feeling that comes from that is
it's
just freaking
tremendous.
amazing.
Tremendous.
When you see people succeed.
But did I ever see myself doing that? No way.
Right.
So I have a sponsee right now who has just picked up 2 sponsees.
How about
and
it?
seeing that happen, a guy that came in looking
You're a
at the
grand
ground.
sponsor.
A grand sponsor.
Look at there.
That's what I said to this kid the other day.
Happy?
I'm your grand sponsor.
I'm your grand sponsor, sonny.
You do what he says, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, wow.
So it's tremendous. I don't know. I had another thought, but it's gone now.
That's okay. Must have not been important.
It must not have been. But doing the next right thing for the next right reason really has built self-esteem in me, and I didn't even know I didn't have self-esteem, And another thing I discovered was that I have anxiety. I lived with this anxiety my whole life. I could not identify that. That's what it was.
Well, we always mask it with drugs and alcohol and wild behavior or chaos, or it's always something. But like you say, when I can just sit and be in the moment, that's when you can really start to relate to things that are you.
Yeah.
And if one of them's anxiety, go, okay, now I got something to work on. I got to work on this.
Yep.
Or character defects. Now I got something to work on. And anything that you identify, you can work on it.
Yeah.
You can.
And the anxiety most of it has fallen off by doing the next right thing for the next right reason. Because that anxiety was fear you're going to find out, fear you're going to know the truth. And the truth today is good enough. It never was before. I would lie about shit I didn't need to lie about.
Yeah.
And make stuff up and try to, anything you wanted to talk about. Yeah, I know all about that. I did that 20 years ago. Well, you're only 21. Yeah, I know, but, and that's how I lived my life. I always had an answer for everything.
One of the things we sometimes ask at the end of our time is, what advice do you have? Although we don't give advice, what suggestion would you have for somebody who is either contemplating going to their first AA meeting or is new in the program?
So the suggestion I would have is go there and surrender. And if you don't know what surrender means, ask somebody who's been around for a while, because all it really means is, please tell me what I need to do next. Please tell me what I need to do next. and it's as simple as that.
And then doing it.
And then do it. Then do
Yeah.
it. Then do it.
Yeah.
So are we almost over?
Yeah, we're going to come to our end of our time, but
Because I got to tell you about the 4-leaf clover.
Oh, yeah!
All right?
All right,
I'm
good.
looking over
Talk to me,
four-leaf
brother.
clover.
So I look all over this. I told you the story in the last episode.
Yeah, for
and
those of you who didn't listen to the first episode for whatever reason,
What
you
is
would
wrong
have,
with you?
go back and listen to it now. Or at one point, and I'll let Bob tell it about his God story when he was young.
Okay.
So if you want to read.
So it talks about in the book, many of us turned our back on God at a young age. So that was my story. I went to church school. I talked to this nun. She said that if you're having a genuine crisis of faith, that if you ask God to show himself to you, he will. So I go to this playground, and I say, God, if you're really there, I'm going to find a 4-leaf clover. And I look for a couple of hours, and I do not find a 4-leaf clover. And I go, there is no God, And later on, that kind of turned into, if there is a God, he doesn't care about me. But so I've been in the program a couple of years. My son has passed away. I've made it through that. And I've actually still found joy and have not made my life about that. And I'm kind of living this new way of life, and I'm really digging it, man. I'm really digging it. I'm not the same guy that walked in the door, but I told this story about this 4-leaf clover, and maybe a couple times. I really don't know. And one day in the mail was an envelope. My name is misspelled. The address is wrong. It has a 4-leaf clover stamp on it. And inside the envelope is 2 real 4-leaf clovers pressed in wax paper, okay? And I still to this day have no idea
Was
who
the
sent
return
them.
address God?
It was nothing. And nobody has ever owned that. And if you guys know alcoholics like I do, I can't imagine somebody sitting on that secret, okay? They got to tell somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, I was told early on, do something nice for somebody, don't tell them. I wasn't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm still not really capable of doing that.
So there's a mystery afoot.
So these 2 real, actual 4-leaf clovers, and I talked to this guy. I mean, you guys know this guy Gus, and I talked to this guy Gus about it. And he said, Bobby, God's economy, it's just a drop in a bucket. 37 years. It only took 37 years to get those. You asked for God, and He gave it to you. 37 years. Just a drop in a bucket.
In God's economy. That's fantastic.
But he's right, man. I got them I asked for a 4-leaf clover, and I got it.
Yeah.
And Mark,
it wasn't on your timetable.
And
it
you
wasn't
got
on my
God.
timetable, and I got God. And there was another point here, and it's gone out of my head already. I get
Well,
excited
that
about
happens
stuff.
to us, doesn't it?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Yep.
Yeah. All
Oh,
right.
I know what I was going to say. So you were talking about life beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
All right. So I heard a guy. I went to a meeting in Boston one time, and I heard a guy say, "I have a life today that's beyond compare." And that's how I feel. And I live this crazy, crazy ass life, man. This full of adrenaline and full of excitement and chaos and just this crazy life. And I'll be honest, I enjoyed a lot of that. I did. The consequences is what brought me in here, It was waking up in the stuff that I didn't do that I should have, or the stuff that I did do that I shouldn't have. And that's what drove me in here finally, what got me sick of being who I was. But life beyond compare, life beyond wildest dreams. What is that? I lead an ordinary life today.
Mm-hmm.
I have an ordinary life. Who knew that's what I wanted?
Yeah.
And I wasn't capable of it,
Yep.
And today that's what I have. And I
on
got a
that
kid that
note-
I'm raising. And I want to throw one last thing. I know I'm kind of maybe running over. I want to throw one last thing in here. That second son that I had was born with some disabilities. And his mother and I were using when we met. And when she found out she was pregnant, she stopped. But after about a year or so that he was alive, she went back, and I was getting sober, and she didn't want anything to do with it, and she ended up leaving the kid with me. And I've raised this kid with special needs for the last 14 years. I want to say this. I watched her struggle. She was in and out of his life for a long time, but she's clean and sober 3 years today.
Oh, no
All
kidding.
right.
Right now, she's clean and sober 3 years.
Fantastic.
And if that ain't God working, I don't know what is.
Awesome. Well, Bob, we appreciate so much you coming in and putting up with us for a 2-parter, our first in history. And your message is great, and I'm glad it's going to get out there on the Glum Lot Podcast. And, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So until then, I'm Mark.
And I am Brett.
I'm Bob. Thank you so much for having me.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.